Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and here we are back where we left off. Pretty much right about, I believe. Just taking care of some grass, some scenery around... Well, we don't actually have a name for this area. Perhaps I should name that mill sooner or later. We haven't done much in that area, and that's really not the focus of this episode anyway, so... It's not the kind of thing I should be coming up with a name for it right now. In fact, I'm not even sure what it does. Of course, I have to come up with that, so that's not relevant. Anyways, so today what we do is a little bit of scenery work on the ground here, and then we go off and do a lot of terrain work over towards the gorge, because I finally start to found some, some decent ideas, basically, of what we're going to do over there. And I'll show you when we get there, but before then I was captivated by the Greyhound bus driving towards a dead end, and, okay, yeah, here we go, I think. Let me see. Oh yeah, no, I throw down one thing, and this perplexes me how long it ends up being, and then I get lost, and then I come back, and then, yeah, I figured it out again. I was really confused by that, because I had no idea that I was making, a piece of track that was 6 tiles long. Whether or not you're doing terrain tracks, something that big is probably not a good idea. I decided, I left it there, but I'm going to go and do it in increments for the rest of this. Obviously, I'm not going to slam down the whole thing at once. Anyways, this is sort of the big area that we start working on. And, of course, up until now, it's been empty, it's been blank, it's been, I've not really been sure what to put here, because the area is kind of weird in terms of where the track is going. Obviously, when you have a crossing like this, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Generally, it's not something you see in railroads. The tracks are going more or less parallel all the time. At least out in this area where you have a bunch of railroads competing to get from point A to point B. Man, that just made me dizzy. Alright. So, now I get back to this after I flattened that out, because that gave me a better... to create a base height, to create a minimum height was fairly, it was something I could do. It was fairly simple. It was a little time consuming, but in the end it was, for the better, and it has the added advantage of being time consuming. So that took up a little bit of my 2-hour work day. Anyways, there we go. We just sort of sort this area out, and I'm going to work with the area a little bit more later. Right now it was just sort of the flatten everything. And we do some unflattening here in a minute, I think. But this was a lot of me trying to figure out where stuff goes from here. I was thinking of putting a river, but instead I'm just going to go with a riverbed. And I'll mark that out towards the middle of the episode. But first I decided to take care of this area, which needs some TLC, and then give it a nice big hill. And I would have gone bigger, but that, I don't know, it wasn't conducive. It was kind of being troublesome. And making a big terrain feature is not as easy as you'd hope anymore. Especially when the map has gotten this big. It can be kind of uncooperative at times. The map will actively try to prevent you from doing anything huge or, time consuming. Also, it may not help that I was downloading the War Thunder update in the meantime, which, by the way, freaking War Thunder update, 9 gigabytes, huge, and the babes go wild. There's a little autosave right there. Autosave has saved my life. But, anyways. So, taking care of this was, one of the more awkward constructions of the day, and, probably the most awkward construction of the day, because it was the sort of thing where I had to once again figure out my slope vector, and that was kind of a pain, and I didn't get it right, and so, even going into it, that area is rubbish, to use a wonderful British term. The area is a mess. Alright. And I might actually expand upon this hill later, so make it a little bit less rubbish. You'll see it ends up looking like striped velvet or something when I finally raise it up enough. And I use the plateau tool a little bit to combat that, but not in a huge sort of thing. It's not massive. Oh, and I try to use the hill tool there just to get a leg up. Doesn't work. Doesn't do what I wanted it to do, so I end up with a square cursor, actually. That was one of the weirdest things. Oh, did I solve that by now? Yeah, I solved that by now. I was trying to figure out... I looked away for a minute, and then I remembered I ended up with the damn square cursor after I was working on that, and it took me too long to figure out what exactly I was doing. But we could definitely use that in the future. I feel like if I figure out exactly how to make the best of the square cursor, and of course the square cursor being represented, or is the representative of using that topography thing as a brush, and that could be very interesting, because, well, just because it is a change of pace, for one, and if I make that brush big enough, or, no, wait, it had some maximum size. Frankly, the thing I was begging for this whole time was just a bigger brush, and I wasn't going to break out the terrain tracks to build a hill, unless I was going to turn it into a mountain. Anyways, so over here, I was wondering where a river could go, and I was comparing elevations and this, that, and the other, and eventually I settled upon the fact that I can't. There's nowhere for me to fit a massive hill here. There's nowhere for me to fit a river there, considering there's supposed to be a massive hill. Some of the things were plausible, but they weren't really feasible. Especially considering if this is like the Continental Divide, or even a divide, period, having the rivers this close to one another is kind of awkward. It may look fine because you really won't be looking at them, but from a geological point of view, it's really kind of awkward and stupid. Anyways, I have no idea what I was doing there, but this is me getting distracted from what I was doing. Alright, I wanted to show you guys what I'm doing here. That track right there is, of course, it's a terrain track. It's 4M standard bump. So, it's not something that we're going to be using to put trains on, even though the grade there could probably be evened out to a solid 3%. But, I don't know, I'll have to make the terrain significantly hospitable, or, significantly inhospitable, I should say, to make running a track down there sort of impractical. Or, maybe I could throw a couple of rusty ends there, although they wouldn't really be getting anywhere. Theoretically, this could have been a track, but I want to make it clear that building a track down here would have been damn near impossible. Impossible. And I've got to also work with the terrain that Jader's set up for me at the end there, and that's something I'm really going to have to build off of, and it may help me considerably with the way things are supposed to be. I decided to do this area, and I decided to do this area like this, and I may come to regret it. I may want to do things differently, but this is the way they're going to be right now. Which is not this gravel road here, because that's here to stay, but the coming out of these, basically joists and attaching to them. I'm not sure if that was the best way to do things, because it's making this, making that thing very steep, and that's really not what I was going for. Of course, the steepness could contribute significantly to, the way everything is going. The reason trains aren't going down there, I guess. Although we've got to point out again, we've got to make this area so that it's significantly inhospitable, and frankly, the thing that I hate doing that I really wish I could do, which is filling in the gaps, really helps, sort of sort out the geological presence or the topographical presence of an area. It's the kind of thing where if I could easily fill in the gaps, if I could find these little, the holes in our layout that are between two pieces of track. If we could take the holes in our layout and fill them in and put lakes and mountains and this, that, and the other there, it would be fairly clear as to why the track goes this way, even though, I'm not really under the impression that people care most of the time. And I don't blame you. But it would become fairly clear as to where things are going, or why things go the direction they go, I should say. Because right now it just seems like, obviously, when we designed the map, we did not design it with a topographical location in mind, and therefore we just sort of threw it together. And so when I was drawing the big map, I just sort of went, okay, it's going to wiggle here, and it's going to go under itself here, and there's going to be a town here, and here, and here. And to me, I guess it made sense, and I may have had more grandiose plans, or I may have had no plans at all when I came up with it. But the point is, whatever I had then, I don't have now. I don't have the same sort of plan or the same sort of idea. So, the thing to keep in mind is that now I'm making it up as I go, but despite the fact that we've made things in such a way where it may not make sense at all, then I've just got to work around that. It makes things a little bit difficult, but you can always find a solution or an answer if you dig deep enough. Especially in a fictional universe. Hell, you can just come up with something. Oh, they didn't build it here because somebody owns that land and this, that, the other. And here I go saying, you ever heard of eminent domain? Although it wouldn't really make too much sense. That town that we run down through, Milford or Farmington or whatever it's called, whatever. I think it's called Milford. It would have been an interesting point to have what's basically a switchback, maybe in the early time of the railroad. But, coming up another way may not have been particularly feasible, and that gully that it currently goes up was much more cost-effective because it was more or less already there. There are only a couple of cuts on that area, and there are no bridges to go over. That's something funny about building railroads in an area that's either mountainous or, rather devoid of water. When around here in New England, you really see it everywhere. You see it, and by it I mean water. You see bridges everywhere. Every 20 feet. Every 20 yards, the train's going over another bridge, or at least you've got a pipeline. For water, you got a pipe that runs under the tracks to get a river from one side to the other without undermining the foundations of the embankment or without building a bridge. But anyways, what I just made there is what's going to be a river gully, and no, there's not going to be any water in it to begin with. But it's worth pointing out that our town down there is more or less on a floodplain. It's at the basin, or it's at the bottom, I should say, of this river gully that doesn't have any water in it right now, like I said, but could get water after a heavy rain. And it's very good for them because they've got farms down there. But it's the kind of thing where it's... what's the word? It's potentially dangerous to both the farmers and the railroad, and when there's heavy rains... I don't know if this could be a plot point or not, I'm coming up with it on the spot. When there's heavy rains, you're very likely to get flooding down there. Which is why they have a couple of, you have a couple of ponds that empty over time and then refill when the rain comes. It's a place for the water to go. Anyways, here's me just doing some little touch-up stuff around the edge here because I was coming to the end of my time and I figured, well, I said I'd balance things evenly, so here we go. We did a lot of groundwork and now we're just filling out doing some grass. I will point out that it's sometimes if you have a thin spot in the trees, it's worth putting grass farther back just so that you can't see it as well from the rails. The ideal of having stuff visible everywhere, basically having the same level of detail everywhere, is really nice, but it's not something that's usually easily accomplishable, and I don't even necessarily aim to do it from the perspective of being focused on the train. I say if you're focused on the train, you shouldn't be able to see the edge of the map, unless the map is obnoxiously flat and you'd be seeing the horizon or something. And if you're looking out of the window of the train, you shouldn't be able to see anything out of the ordinary. You should be able to see full-on scenery from the window of the train no matter where you are. And so that's why I put the grass right here. just so that when you're coming through and you're looking out the window and the AI is driving, or even you're looking out of the cab, you get to see some nice tree lines. Anyways, Train Man out.